So I apologize for that, but okay, let's get started. So thank you for joining our Tech Talk today. Today we have McKay Moore, one of our graduates, and they're actually going to be talking about finding your first tech job after graduation and how to excel in it. So thank you for joining us and take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for everyone that I was able to make it today, and I hope that my presentation helps you in whatever position you're in, or whatever like your kind of phase of life you're in, or phase of the job search as well. Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit about me, about how I ended up going to the Tech Academy, and before I go into my presentation. So I am originally from a reasonably small town in southeastern Idaho, and I did my undergraduate at University BYUI there, and I was planning on getting my master's degree in counseling. And so I had applied for the school, and then I was thinking a lot about like what I wanted to do, and realized, I've always been interested in computers and programming, and that if I were to pursue something in computers and programming now, instead of rather than later, that I'd have more opportunities, because if I were to get my master's degree in counseling, then I would like finish the degree and then start a private practice. And then that would sort of be my story for the next, 20, 30 years, for my career. And so I decided that I was going to, after just having finished a degree in psychology, was going to go to the Tech Academy. And so they used to have a satellite office in Salt Lake. And so my plan was to move down to Salt Lake and begin like attending in person there. You know how they have the satellite offices. But I moved down to Salt Lake, and I actually never went to the offices because I just did online. So much for moving down to Salt Lake. So I finished the Tech Academy. I was living on brother's couch for like 6 months while I did it. And then after I finished the program, I sent out a ton of applications, and one of those being at GoEngineer. And I was hired at GoEngineer just a few weeks after completing the Tech Academy course. And then I've been working there since. So I completed in around April of 2022 and have been working there since. So yeah. And so as for the goals of this talk, there are like sort of 3 different areas that I'd like to focus on. So I'll talk about ANKI like quite a bit in this talk, and it's a tool that I use to like manage my learning. And I also hope that you guys will be able to understand some priorities in the job search and how you're supposed to navigate that, and then how to be successful on the job after you find one. And so sort of roadmap for the talk. I'm going to talk about ANKI first, just so you get an idea of it and how it may help in the job search process as you're like learning as well, and then when you're on the job. And then I'll also talk about using ANKI and ChatGPT, or like Bard or another LLM. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. And then in addition to that, if you guys have questions, be sure to put them in the chat so we can answer them in the end. I'll look through the questions, and if they seem like they'd be good to like answer now, I'll read those out and then address them. So ANKI is a really powerful program that helps you structure your learning. So I'll talk a little bit about like psychology of learning. My degree's coming in handy, I guess. And then we'll talk about how ANKI sort of helps that. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the forgetting curve. It's a concept that was coined by Hermann Ebbinghaus, who was a German psychologist that studied learning. So his kind of like landmark experiment was he was going to try to memorize a set of like nonsense syllables, so like ba, da, like those sorts of things. And he would try to memorize as much as he can, and then he would test himself on those syllables, and then he would measure his results through time as he tested. So if you'll see here in the bottom right, we have this graph that represents the forgetting curve. So right after you learn a concept or an idea, your understanding or your memory of that concept descends rapidly. But as you repeat that learning, or do repetition with that learning, you're able to come back up to like a full level of that idea. And then as you don't like touch base with it again, it will then descend. One thing that's important to note here as well is that as you continue to repeat and touch base with this material, this the slope here levels off. So you'll get to a point where you understand it, and it takes longer and longer for you to forget a thing as you continue to repeat. And this 1 hour 50%, 1 day 70%, 1 week 90% is on average how much you forget a concept or an idea or like of material after learning it. So think like 1 week from now, if you memorized or did this thing, like 90% of that would be gone. So you'd still have 10%, but 90% would be gone. So that's, I don't know, that's, for me, that's pretty frightening to spend effort and then to have that all gone. So two big concepts to sort of combat this forgetting is active recall and spaced repetition. So active recall is this idea that like you're trying to get back at that idea through like you're trying to get that idea through explaining it to yourself or bringing it back into your memory. So if I were to like have like an ANKI card or want to do active recall for like this concept of the forgetting curve, I would say, which psychologist, I would try to answer this question, which psychologist coined the term the forgetting curve? And I try to bring that to my mind that it's Hermann Ebbinghaus, and that would be an example of active recall. Another one, like for our specific use case of like coding and programming and things like that, would be to, what are the 3 different sections on a for statement in C#? You have like the initial condition, what the exit conditions are of the loop, and then you have, what occurs at the end of each loop, if you guys will recall that. So that's another example of active recall. So you're trying to bring forth to your memory like this idea, and by bringing forth it into your memory, you're trying to answer that question. It cements it in your mind. And then, of course, like we have here, like obviously you'll forget it, but after you do this repetition often enough, you'll have that like locked in. And I found that for me, the most difficult part of learning is having that continued mastery over your learning. Before I like ran into ANKI and began using it, learning was always, I really enjoyed learning, but there was also like a degree of sadness that came with learning because I knew that I wasn't going to put in the effort to continue to have mastery over this thing. And so like I learned the thing and it's like, well, I wonder how long it'll be until I forget it, And so obviously with things like you're working with every day, like as a software engineer, you don't forget those things, but because of that repetition. But with ANKI, you're able to automate the process of continually using active recall and continually interacting with that material so you can maintain mastery over that. And that's the principal means by which that occurs is through flashcards. So ANKI has a mobile app as well as a web application and a desktop application. So there are several ways you can interact with ANKI, and like your ANKI account syncs across multiple devices. So this is an example of a card I would give. You see on this top right, we have the question, what is the concept of a signature of an event delegate? Their delegate. Oh, sorry, it looks like I have the 2 different cards here. So we'll just go for this one here. What thing in C# allows functions to be first-class values? And I have an answer. In C#, delegates allow functions to be treated as first-class values. And then down here below, you'll see that there are like 4 different levels of like ease of remembering. So like if it was all right, in the session I reviewed this, Okay, maybe I'll see it again within 10 minutes. And if it's really good, then I'll see it again in like 4 days. And what this does with Anki is, so it'll be pushed ahead 4 days, but when I see that card in 4 days time, these values will be different. And so if I see that card in 4 days time and I still have like really good memory of the thing, the card will be pushed out like 8 days or 16 days. I don't know exactly the increments, but the idea is, as you recall something and have good understanding of it, that concept on the card will be pushed out further and further in time. And then if you aren't able to remember it, it gets pulled forward to the next time you review it. So what the result of this is that as you're going through, you're going to be interacting with the things you remember least. And those things that you like have down like really well will be pushed out further into the future. So as you build these Anki cards, they enable you to maintain a high level of mastery over these things. And it forces you to focus on those things that you don't know well. And so that's kind of like a rundown of Anki. I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more later, but for now, let's see. I'll get back to this slide later. So now I kind of want to go to the job search. So I brought up Anki first, and I'll be touching base with it later, just so you can have that in your mind before I, like as I'm talking about like being successful in the job, because for me, Anki is like a key part of that success. It also can help in your job search as well, as you're preparing for like technical interviews and stuff. And so one thing for me that so I'll kind of put you in my shoes. So I like moved down from Idaho to do the Tech Academy. I was living on a couch for like 6 months, and like my parents had loaned me out some money, and then I was pretty much living on my credit cards for 6 months as well. So I wasn't making money. And so like it was like pretty nerve-wracking, you know. I kind of a leap of faith to do the Tech Academy, and then after I finish, you know, I'm anxious to get a job. And so in addition to that, when I like was looking for a job, like before, like I've never made more than like with going to school full time and degree in psychology, and then working part time in high school and part time in college. Like I'd never made more than probably $30,000 a year. So I felt like pretty uncomfortable, like applying for jobs that have salaries of like, you know, upwards of like $70,000, $80,000 a year. And like, I just done like this, you know, 5.5 month boot camp. So like the whole idea is that like it should feel uncomfortable, because unless you like have a more like, your professional background is like much more like you may be in like a similar situation. So this whole idea that like we shouldn't feel comfortable, I think like isn't the case, because, you know, depending on where you're at, whether you're going to school or doing the boot camp, like the hoped effect of going to this boot camp is that it have like a dramatic change in your life, that you get a new job, you do this thing. So and like dramatic changes are uncomfortable. So you should be uncomfortable in this process. And so for me, the strategy I approached was just to apply for as many jobs as I could, both local and remote opportunities. And so for local opportunities, you'll probably have a better chance for that job. And the job that I received was a local position, because when you're applying to remote opportunities, like everyone in the United States is also applying to the remote opportunities. But when you're applying to local opportunities, you have those like local people, and then those who would be willing to move. And so that's a much decreased like a group of people. And so, yeah, for me, it was all about applying to as many positions as I could. Applying to as many positions as I could. I think the Tech Academy has you apply to 10 positions every day. And so that's what I sort of did as I went through applying to these positions. And then one thing that I didn't take advantage of during that time, and I think it would have been helpful, but is networking. So I like to call networking nepotism, but for friends. So your hope with networking is that you're interacting with this person, and that obviously you want to be like as much as they are helping you, you'd like to help them. But yeah, so like you're hoping to get like into a position through someone you meet, and so this is like, so you can be reaching out to people on LinkedIn. You could be emailing people, joining like groups that are like for a specific technology, like C#, .NET, React, like whatever your particular tech stack is. You can be reaching out to people there, and then also feel free to be reaching out to like don't feel afraid to reach out to like people who are in high level positions like senior engineering managers and things like that. This line is particularly good. Hi, blank. You're where I'd like to be in X years. What do you wish you could have known X years ago? So this says, hey, like, I'm sort of like, one, it's a compliment that you're saying, I'd like to be where you're at in 10 years. And then this also opens the door for, mentorship. You're asking for some advice. And so this will help you like find people that are, like willing to do those sorts of things. And then, yeah, so my strategy was to apply as many jobs as I could. And then I didn't do any networking. I just made sure that the number of jobs I did was like a high level. And then I did have multiple, or let's see, from the 60 or so jobs I applied to, I received like a call back from two. One, I just like the night before I had so you had to do like a technical test before I went in and to do like further interviews. And I had like eaten an entire pizza right before I did the test. So I was like carved out of my mind. And I just like had no ability for abstract thought. So I flopped that one for sure. And then with with GoEngineer, I was able to do a couple behavioral interviews. I did a technical interview. I did a take-home project, and then I met with the team, and then I was offered the position. And so as your priorities go through, you want to make sure that you're applying to as many jobs. Like in your job search, the number one thing you need to focus on is applying to as many jobs as you can. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of, I'm just going to learn a little bit more, and then I'll begin to apply jobs, en masse later. But the thing is that like, what is going to get you a job is applying for jobs. So that's like the key metric. And so before we go on, are there any questions currently in the, like, if you guys want to drop any in the chat? I don't see anything now, but feel free as we keep going through, just so your questions are like most relevant as we're discussing them. But yeah, and so I had a behavioral and technical interview, and then as I've gone through, I made sure to keep up on my skills and things like that. Let's see. Yep, so we'll go to the next one. Okay, so after you have, found a job, you've networked with a lot of people, or you've applied to a ton of positions. Actually, one more thing I'd like to talk about before I go here. So it's important to have the correct frame of mind as you're applying for jobs. So in the application process, and I guess in the tech industry generally, there's like something that's talked a lot about is like imposter syndrome, where you're like, who am I to be applying for these jobs where I'm making more money than I've, ever made before? And you just don't feel like you're good enough to be applying for that position. And then maybe after you apply, you don't do well on the technical interview portion, and you're like, man, like I wasn't able to even like meet the bar even in that degree to be able to continue in the process. So there's an important term in psychology called reframing. So the whole idea for this is that the way we think, and obviously so, the way we think about situations vastly or has a huge effect on the way we feel about the situations. So when I had this experience where I, applied for this job, I did the technical interview, or it was just a technical assessment. So I was like answering questions, like a little bit of a coding interview sort of thing. And I just like totally flopped. I could have said like, clearly this is an indication that I'm not prepared, that I need to do something more. And like, who am I to be applying for these jobs where I can't even get this to this degree? So that's a really negative way I can perceive that situation. Conversely, I can think, okay, so for this position, I didn't hit it for these reasons. I look through the assessment or maybe recall about like what I did poorly on the assessment. And instead of saying like, woe is me, like I can't do this thing, just say, okay, like my end goal is to get a job. And so I'm willing to do what is necessary in order to get the job. So I'm going to look at what I failed at and be, okay, that's fine. I'm going to learn those things so that the next time I come across this situation, I'm much more better prepared to answer correctly or, do the right thing. And so reframing is a very powerful thing because it's like, especially if after you've done so much, it's easy to kind of get into the woe is me frame of mind. But if your goal is a job, you should just like ruthlessly pursue that and do whatever it takes. Okay. Now we're like past the job search. We've done like the technical interviews and we're on the job. So you are graduated from a boot camp or you've gone to school and you're in your first position. So your first position, so there's a big difference between learning about a thing and then doing the thing full time, right? So there are a lot of things that like are normal for engineers to know that you don't know going in, and it's not like a fault of anyone, but it's just the nature of things, like setting up environments and things like that. And these are more local to the particular company, and they have like their particular workflows and all those things like that. And again, as you go into this new position, it's like totally okay to feel like super uncomfortable. And because it's such a drastic change, that should be the status quo. You should feel uncomfortable on your first job, your first day as you go through. One thing that I focused on was that again, with like setting the goal and sort of relentlessly pursuing that goal, I want to be like a very good engineer, right? And so that's my goal. And failure indicates that there's something that I didn't understand or something that I did incorrectly. And so those are learning opportunities rather than opportunities to like bash myself for not being able to complete this thing. And so when you're on the job, the most important thing is to continue to learn and develop those skills necessary to be able to do the job at a high level, right? And so when I first started, my mentor sort of told me about this, that right now, as it currently stands, like your growing understanding or having a good understanding is more important than my output. So it can feel, since you have gotten this job, you can feel like, oh, I need to really contribute as much as I can at the very beginning. But as you come in, you're learning a lot. And even among like mid-level to senior level engineers, like it's been said that like we really only expect you to begin contributing in a big way like 6 months in, which is crazy to think that like the first 6 months, obviously you'll be doing things and obviously you'll be contributing, but it takes a while before you get to a high level and you're able to like really dynamically do the job well. And so for succeeding on the job, like especially as you first go, really focus on your understanding over your output. Like it's understandable that you won't have an incredibly, and it's expected that you won't have an incredibly high output as you begin. But it's important that you focus on those things that will be increasing that in the future, right? Which will be your understanding and your ability. So for me, every time I was going through, and this will occur much more often in the beginning than it will later, but as you go through the code base, as you're working day to day, try to capture those things that you don't understand. And we'll talk about this a little bit, I think it's on this next slide, but you'll begin putting those into Anki so that you're able to recall them later. And so that those are added to your like broad knowledge base. And it's important not to go like, there's a balance with it where you don't want to go like way too in depth where you'll be memorizing information that like you won't be interacting with much. But like conversely, you also want to make sure you're capturing those things that will be helpful to you. So as you're going through, you're capturing the things you don't understand. And then one thing that I requested from the very beginning was to be able to have more exposure to things that I don't understand. So I asked my mentor to be able to like just like for an hour every morning, just be reading the code, our code base, like going through. So I would literally like go like file by file and then grab those things that I don't understand and either like make note of them or search up on the spot to try to understand like the process that is going on there, or what is happening. And then another thing is reading the documentation. So I do the similar thing. At my job, we get like 2 to 4 hours on Fridays to be able to like focus on learning something. And so, I take that time to read through the docs. And again, I just go from like top to bottom. This is the example picture is the .NET documentation. Yeah, so like I've done that for C#, I've done that for JavaScript. And we can talk about like a couple of good places if you guys are interested for documentation besides like frameworks and stuff. So like W3 Schools is really good. I've used that one a lot. And then there's like I think Mozilla has some really good JavaScript docs as well. Yeah, so that's what succeeding on the job looks like. So one powerful thing that has come about like fairly recently and sort of taken the world by storm is ChatGPT and large language models. And I'd say using Anki and ChatGPT is like for me, it's like insanely helpful on the job day to day. And so if you guys, I'm sure most of you are, but if you're not familiar with ChatGPT, it's like this chatbot where you're able to ask it questions and it like gives like great answers to those questions. And then you can explain things to ChatGPT to help like in debugging and things like that. So one thing that is difficult with Anki and that is addressed by ChatGPT is you're having to create these cards. And so as you're going through, I think I will, let's see, we'll go back. I think I'll pull up Anki here. So this is what Anki looks like. And I'll pull over here. So I was actually, just before this, I was building Anki cards for Python. Right now I'm doing like, I don't know if you guys have heard of LeetCode, but it's like technical interview questions. And so one thing that's difficult with Anki cards is just nature of the system of Anki cards. So I'm writing out these questions. And I'm writing in my answers here, but I have to like type out all my answers and I'm like, oh, what was me? I have to write out the answers to my questions, right? But ChatGPT is actually really powerful in this regard, in that you can ask these questions to ChatGPT and specify like how many words you want, and it'll give you like a truncated response that is like pretty much perfect. So, like sometimes I'll look through and like, okay, that doesn't seem quite right, or something like that. This helps you like increase the speed at which you're making cards, and as an extension of that, like helps you broaden your base for your knowledge and understanding. So Matt Troughton has a question. He says, Anki are just flashcards. Yep. So it's like a app that enables you to keep track of decks of flashcards, and then also structures your learning in that, like as you review your flashcards, those that you get done and are like have locked down are pushed out into the future, and those that you don't quite understand or weren't able to answer fully are pulled up further into like the next time you review, are pulled out closer to the next time you review. And ideally, what you're doing is you're reviewing these Anki flashcards every day, so that you can continue with this active recall, so you can build a broad base of knowledge and pretty rapidly. multiple of my coworkers have like told me that like I know a lot more than they would expect for an engineer given my time that I've spent on the job. So, and then Rob Ryder asks, app for a phone. Yes, so they have a mobile version for Android and Apple. The Apple one, Apple, it costs like $26, but it's well worth your money. The one for Android is free, and then ANKI is a desktop app, so you're downloading something and use it on a desktop, or it is a like a web application, so you can do it in the web in the browser as well. And so, yeah. So what I do is I will go through. So I'll pull up some docs like W3 schools, and some people will argue that like, or there's this like common trope of like engineers where you're really just a really good Googler. And I'll agree, that is like very important to, if you don't know something, to be able to Google it. And like Googling is definitely a skill to be able to like Google correctly so you get response, because Stack Overflow is just like a massive form of people like having computer issues, right? Or having code issues. And so if someone else has had your problem before, then it is great to be able to find if they've had. But for like kind of what I'd like to do is with ANKI is I'm able to memorize a lot of this stuff. So instead of having it to be, okay, I know this thing I'd like it to do, I'm going to go look up on Google or, do a chat to ChatGPT to be able to get that. Just like where you don't have to think much when you're speaking a language, you're able to just kind of like speak it without thinking much. So these coding concepts and coding ideas can become blocks in your mind that you can like sort of move around and interact with instead of like then being a 1 degree separation where you have the idea but you don't have the implementation of the idea, so you have to look up the implementation. You can know the implementation. And so what I like to do is I'll go through these docs, and you kind of have to build a muscle for like determining whether this should be Anki-fied or whether I should just like not worry about this. But you just go through and like try to memorize these important bits of the language so that you can have mastery over that. And so, yeah, that's what I do. Like I'll go over here and like, so this was one of my most recent ones. Give an example of concatenating 2 lists in Python. So right now I am doing like learning LeetCode questions. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's just like technical interview questions for some positions where you're required to like code on the spot. If you can think of like a Google coding interview or things like that, this is what that is pretty much. And so what I'm doing is learning that. And so for Anki, so I'm asking for these like small responses that I can then put into my Anki cards and review later. Or like ChatGPT is also incredibly powerful in like helping you understand or like really identify what is occurring. So I don't know if you guys have interacted much with ChatGPT, but like from this like question, I'm just asking how I remove all distinct elements from a list. It gives a very in-depth response of like different ways that I can accomplish that. And then it's just a really good description. So like before ChatGPT, we'll go back to my presentation here. Before ChatGPT, like you would have to have a question and then you sort of have to figure out where that is on Google by yourself. And I think that is still a good skill. So you don't want ChatGPT to be a crutch or Google Bard if you use that. But ChatGPT enables you to have a mentor like right there that you can ask personalized questions to and get like generally good responses. There are still like ChatGPT still hallucinates things and like makes stuff up. But for the most part, it is like very good. And so this enables you to have like someone like a tutor who's there as you're like learning to be able to ask questions for it. So it really streamlines the learning process. And then with Anki, if you're making cards of those questions that you learn, then you're able to maintain that like knowledge over the long term. And so that's sort of what I have for this presentation. One warning is that like these are excellent tools, so don't let them become a crutch, especially for ChatGPT. When you are interacting with ChatGPT, you want to make sure that you come away from the situation like knowing more than you did before, right? So you don't want to just sort of, write me up something so I can, get this done, and then just plug that into what you're doing, and then you've like learned nothing more, right? And so you really want to use this as a really good tool as you're going through. Let's see. I think I'd like to go over maybe just a little bit. I think this will maybe be helpful for those who are really interested in like doing Anki cards well. So these are some like high level things that have helped me a ton in like my Anki cards. So in really any discipline where you're wanting to like continually improve and do it, like the number one thing, the number one thing is to continue doing it. So if you're wanting to find a job, what's the metric that you use to ensure that you're getting a job, or what leads you into getting a job is applying for jobs or networking, right? So for Anki cards, if you're wanting to be able to have mastery over this material, it's key that you're very consistent in reviewing. So I review every day. One thing important is you want these questions to have like a one answer. You don't want like 9 paragraphs of what you're expected to do, because it's much harder to like come up with that using active recall than it is to be like, okay, this thing, what is this? And then like a terse response to that. So that's like the key. So you have this idea of like atomic cards. You want each card to be one concept. And with that, since you're going to be doing it every day, or hopefully, you can use pre-generated cards. So there are like people who have Anki decks on like various topics. But I would say you want to shy away from those. So it's fine to like incorporate them a little bit, but you don't want to ever get to a point where you feel bogged down by like what you have to do every day. And using pre-generated decks can quickly get to that point, because you're always having new cards come in. And so you creating your own cards custom enables you to like only care about the information you care about. Whereas if you took those preloaded decks, there may be a lot of information that you don't care about, and then you're going to get bitter because you're forcing yourself to do this thing you don't enjoy, and then you're going to stop doing Anki. And that's not the place where you want to be. So you can use those, but you just have to be very disciplined with pretty much deleting cards you don't want, And then additionally, you can have the option of multiple decks in Anki, and I would like argue that you should just have one deck, because it's never enjoyable to be like, I finished my Anki cards today. Now I just have 3 more decks I need to do, right? You want to be able to be done when you finish with that. And then keep reviewing. And so I think that's everything I have for my presentation. Are there any questions you guys have about my job, about the interview process, about sort of things like that as we go through? Let's open up the Q&A.
All right, thank you for that great presentation. I've already told you this, but you probably need a sponsorship from me.
Right.
But all right, we have quite a few questions in there. Also, I can turn on the mics if you guys want to ask questions verbally. Let me do that really quickly. Okay, so you guys should be able to do that. All right, so sorry, my screen is a bit laggy. Looks like Sherry's got a question. Will you tell more about your job?
Yeah, I will. So my job, the tech stack. So I'll kind of go over the tech stack, what my day-to-day looks like. I think that would be like fairly sufficient. And if you guys have any further questions, like feel free to ask. So for my job, I actually just recently moved to a new thing. So I used to be over many smaller apps that we have, and now I just moved to like a big like task management software that we use. And so for me, my day-to-day looks like so we use Kanban. Actually, we're more agile, but so for the like software development, how do you say, design methodology, we use Agile. So what I do is we have like a list of tasks that need to get done, maybe bug fixes, feature requests, and things like that. Every day I'll just like look at those and I'll grab one and I'll begin working on that. And then after I complete that feature or request, I'll send it off to one of my teammates for them to look it over and see if it looks good. And then that like PR that I have, the code gets pushed through until it gets merged, and then every once in a while we'll release the new features. Yeah, so that kind of looks that at a high level. That's what my day-to-day looks like. As for our tech stack, we're in C# and .NET, and then we use Bootstrap and some jQuery as well on the front end, and then we're just using like SQL Server. So.
Great. Sorry, forgot to mute my mic there. Is this the first tech job you've had?
Yes. Yep, my first tech job. So I finished the boot camp, and then I think it was like 3 weeks after, like I'd sent out all these applications, and they were like pretty anxious to hire someone, and so the interview process was pretty quick. It was probably like 4 interviews over a week and a half to 2 weeks, which is pretty quick. And then I was offered the position.
Great. All right, Matt's asking, did ChatGPT come out before or during COVID? I think it's been around for a while. It's just like the new ChatGPT 3 that's been really popular. And then he's also asking if it's better than which one's better, Google Brad or ChatGPT. I personally prefer ChatGPT, but I'll add on to whatever McKay has to say after that.
Yeah, so I like ChatGPT a little bit more. For some questions, I'll do Google Bard, but ChatGPT, if you say, "Could I have it in less than 50 words?" it will give you in less than 50 words. If you tell the Bard, it'd be like, "Nah, bro, I'm just gonna give you whatever answer I want." So yeah, I like ChatGPT in that respect. But Bard can look up online, where if you use I think ChatGPT version 4 can look up online, but 3.5 can't. So there's that as well. So if you're looking for maybe like a bug fix or like a weird behavior, if you're looking if someone's had your same issue, it's better to go with Bard because it'll be able to look up on the internet as well. So there's that, maybe some trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say the same thing with ChatGPT for the version 4. You'd actually have to pay. And I personally think the free version does everything for me personally on a day-to-day basis. So I don't really use Bard that much, but unless I have to, because it's only updated to, I think now maybe 2022, before it was 2021. So I personally just use it whenever I have to like check on something that's like more frequent. But I definitely like the interface of, ChatGPT way better. Anyhow. All right. How often do they ask you to code on the spot at your job?
So this would be like an interview process, or like I'm peer programming with someone?
I don't know, Casey, if you want to clarify on that.
Oh, in the interview process. So this is something that's sort of different from company to company. So in my interview process, so I guess there's a couple different interviews. So one, you could have like a technical interview where they're just asking you questions about the language. And I had one of these. They're asking you questions about like, they asked me like, what is jQuery? What is Link? What's .NET? All these questions. And then different, like, what do different keywords mean within C#? And so that's more of like a question and answer technical interview. Then you can have a take-home technical project. So that's what I did. So what they had me do is a technical project where I was consuming an API and then presenting it to like a web page. And it was also CRUD, so you could create new entries, delete them, or edit them. Yeah. And then Sherry Chow says, what is LINQ? So it's LINQ. It's language integrated query, I think. But it's just a C# like Microsoft way for using C# to interact with the database. So instead of having to like use C# and then like write SQL and then have that parse to make sure you're not having like any SQL injection issues. Then that SQL is run on the database and that comes back. You just write it in C# and they handle all the implementation and grab you your information or like save it or whatever.
Great. And then another question, what year, oh, sorry, I missed it. Christopher is asking what year you finished the boot camp and got your current position.
So I finished the boot camp in 2022. It was like in April, I think. Yeah, it was like around that time I was finishing, and then I was starting the job like fairly soon thereafter.
Great. And then what did your portfolio look like when you finished the boot camp?
Okay. Yeah. So for my portfolio, I had all the projects that I had done within the boot camp, and I hadn't done any additional projects other than those. And then I also had my website, but that was also done within the boot camp.
Great. Yeah. I was gonna say at the Tech Academy, we actually help you with your portfolio, and then you can also tweak it to make it more personalized. But yeah, he's right. It'll include all of the projects you've worked on during the boot camp, and also you can add the projects you work on after the boot camp. Well, that was the final question. Any other questions? All right, well, let me know if something comes up. But thank you, McKay, so much for this awesome presentation, as always. And also, if you guys do want to watch this recording back, you can check it out on our YouTube channel. I'll try to post it by the end of today. If not, come back on Monday on our YouTube channel, and it should be there. And here is a link of the recording. Also, if you guys want to connect with McKay, is your LinkedIn a good place to do that? I have the link here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have more questions about ANKI, I'm like super psyched about ANKI. So feel free to reach out to me. Like I'm serious. So
I'm like, who do I email to let them know to get your stuff? Also next week we have Chris Thompson joining us for a tech talk. You guys, if you have been joining these tech talks, he's done a bunch of presentations in the past for us. And this one's actually going to be on understanding the current landscape of the tech job market. So it's a good one if you're in the job search process. And then the week after, like I said, we have an in-person event. So let me share Christopher's Tech Talk first. Here it is. And then the in-person one is here at our Portland campus. So you can come in if you're actually within the area, downtown Portland. If not, we will also be live streaming it online. So like how we usually do it on Google Meet. But here is the event page for that. And it's actually one of our previous graduates, Andrew, who graduated in 2016. Oh, it didn't. Did it? Oh, I did it a few times actually. Let me actually put Andrew's name in there. It should pop up once you click it. Either way, he's going to be talking about cybersecurity, or if you've gone through the boot camp and you're not sure if you want to go the development route, maybe there are some other routes you can take. So he's going to be covering all of that. So make sure you join in for that one. If you're in person, definitely. If you're within the Portland area, definitely come in. Which Tech Academy pathway did McKay participate in? Did you take the software developer bootcamp? I think you're asking if he which boot camp he attended.
I think it was that one. It was that's like the full stack sort of one, right? Okay. Yeah, it was that one.
Yes, that's our most popular one. And all of our boot camps, of course, they cover multiple languages, but that one's by far the most popular one, just because it covers Python, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. It covers SQL, C#. It has 2 live projects in there, which basically, you work on, there's a Python one and there's a C# one, and then you can actually add those projects to your resume or your portfolio. But yeah, that's by far the most popular one. All right. Any other questions? Well, all right then. Well, thank you again so much, McKay, for joining us. Remember to look out for the recording. And also, I will email you if you are a Meetup member. I'll email you on Monday for next week's event, but the link should also be in the chat now. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's Tech Talk, and I hope to see you guys next week. And I hope you guys have a good weekend. And then again, thank you, McKay. Talk
Yeah,
to
of
you soon.
course. See you guys.
Bye, guys.